Very good afternoon to all of you. I welcome you to session number 5 of season 2 of ICF interview series, Take Wing, Interesting People, Immersive Conversations. And today's title is Ganesh. What's the title?
Stories in bird song.
Okay. And Ganesh is a seasoned interviewer. People enjoy talking to him.
And he enjoys listening to people.
Yeah. And today's guest is Dagny Saul from ICF. Ganesh is also an ICF member. So
Thanks, Vivek.
most of the participants I also see are from ICF today. So it's going to be an enjoyable conversation. Ganesh, over to you.
Thanks. Thank you. Yes, and welcome all. Welcome everybody. Some familiar faces, some old friends, and there are some new ones also. So that's great. Good to have a mix. Like Vivek said, this is the 5th episode of Take Wing, series of chats in which we meet interesting people from the fields of content development, publishing, and all its tributaries, and writing and storytelling. Today we have someone very interesting, very versatile, and very experienced. And she's living a lifestyle that is pretty much the dream that all of us have. But she's done it, whereas most of us at least haven't. I haven't. So something that she'll give us, lots to envy about. She's Dagny Saul. So Dagny, hi, and welcome again.
Hi,
Thank
Ganesh.
you so much for accepting the invitation.
Yeah.
Let me read out a little bit about Dagny, something that she's written in her own words. And she tells me that she doesn't like to introduce herself in third person. So she's written it in first person. So my name is Dagny. I'm a manuscript editor, writing coach, and storyteller with a flair for drama. I'm an avid reader with a stealthy compulsion to write irreverent humor. It wasn't long before the title of wordsmith was bestowed upon me by some of the most prolific writers from whom I have learned through sheer osmosis. I love to critique other people's work, and I do it well. Editing books and coaching writers come naturally to me. Without even looking for it, I seem to have found my groove at last. I believe my dedication for my work gives me an edge more decidedly than any document proclaiming my competence could have. About my 3 adult kids and 2 boisterous dogs, what can I say? They are my life. Dagny can be, you can read more about Dagny at DAGNY, DagnySol, SOL.com. So thanks and welcome again.
Thank you.
Lovely. So your blog, Dagny, is named, what's the name of your blog? And can you tell us why you've named it so?
My blog is Serenely Wrapped. And
what is the significance of that for you?
Well, when I started the blog in 2010, I was going through some turmoil in my life. I had recently been divorced. My business wasn't picking up well. I was a leadership coach those days, and finding work, living in a small town like Jabalpur was not very easy, because most of the corporate training happens in Bombay or Pune or Hyderabad or Delhi. So for companies to invite somebody from Jabalpur would prove to be expensive for them. So I was really struggling very hard at that point. And I had, of course, as everybody does, anger issues and the whole bag of nonsense. So I thought maybe, if I named my blog something to do with serene, maybe that serenity I would be able to imbibe that serenity more than for my readers. It was more for myself. So
you hoped it would ooze into your life.
Yes. Ooze is the exact word. Yeah.
And hope that has happened. Did that happen?
Yes, it has. I no longer get angry. I think that's quite a victory for a person who was off like a tinder at the drop of a hat.
Right. I think all of us have faced this in some way or the other, anger and, some sort of baggage that we have and frustration that builds up.
Yes.
So it's very heartening to hear that you've overcome that phase.
Yes, I have.
And so if you were to look back to then and, see
Yeah.
yourself in the mirror today, every morning when you wake up,
Yeah.
what is it that you feel?
I feel very content, Ganesh.
Hmm.
I feel extremely content.
I
And
love that word. It's an amazing word.
yes, it is. And I have no regrets anymore. I used to have. I I used to be, as I said, an angry person, and angry people usually look for other people to hang their troubles on. So I've overcome all that, and I've just accepted all of life as it happens. If something happens, it happens. If it doesn't happen, I don't fret about it.
Superb, excellent. I think that is the spirit to have, the mindset to
Yeah,
have in
yeah.
life. I've kind of acquired that in the last few years too. I mean, not that I had too many problems or issues to struggle with, but the usual issues or the usual problems of being an entrepreneur, of having to create your business from scratch, and
Right.
things associated with that have taught me this mindset, and then brought me here. So
I
I
recently
completely
discovered that you're from the advertising background. What made you give up?
Give up
Yeah.
what? No, I've not given
I,
up anything. I've not given up. I've not given up anything. You mean advertising?
okay.
You mean advertising?
Yes, yes. What
Yeah.
made
So
you
when I
deviate
was in
from it?
advertising, I was working for an agency, and that was something that I didn't want to for a long time. So I've always wanted to start something on my own, right? So
Mm-hmm.
when the time was right for that, I just quit. And
Okay.
yes, and then my other pursuits, so my literary pursuits, my love for the written word, my love for coaching people. So those are things that have been tugging at my heart for quite some time there.
Yeah, yeah.
So
That's
one
true.
day I just upped and said, enough, yeah, enough is enough, and let me
Enough,
just do
enough.
it. Yeah. So pretty much. So you've been an entrepreneur for how long now, Dagny?
Ganesh, the only job that I can call a job that I ever held was before I got married from 88 to 91. That was my first job. I worked at it for 3 years. After that, I've been an entrepreneur all my life.
All your life, and that's a long time. 30 years as we speak.
Yes.
It's
Yes.
amazing. It's a lifetime.
Don't add it up all together. It makes me feel old.
Right, but the other side of the coin is experience, right?
True that. I've worn many hats. I mean, over the years, I've been an entrepreneur, but I've been an entrepreneur for diverse domains.
So
I have.
I wanted to ask you about that. You also mentioned coaching, right? Earlier you were
right.
So
Yeah.
can you just walk us through your different roles? What have you done, and why did you come to move from one to the other? I'm very curious to know that.
Yes. In fact, traditionally speaking, I would be called a rolling stone. But I seem to have just oozed from one domain into another naturally. It's not like something I planned on. I did my MSc in physics.
Okay.
And my specialization was in computer applications. And I wanted to learn computers because in my college, they had started the specialization just the year that I graduated. So there were a few computers with CP/M operating system, if anybody is here has heard of it. And MS-DOS came much later. And of course, Windows came even later than that. So I wanted to learn more about computers, but I didn't have the money. And I didn't want my parents to pay for it. So I joined a computer coaching institute.
Okay.
Thinking that, to teach, they'll have to first teach me, then I can teach, right? So that's street smartness worked well in my favor. And I became a systems trainer. And from systems trainer to corporate training was hardly any bump, because I started teaching MBA classes, and in MBA, and I came across mentors who helped me graduate from systems training to corporate training. And so I went into corporate training, and from there then I started writing, because as a corporate trainer, I didn't find material, Indian stories. for
Okay,
the
okay.
Indian audience.
Oh, cases, examples and case
Case,
studies.
yeah, case
Mm.
studies and examples. Because, you
Mm.
know, when you are trying to teach a concept, the easiest way to teach it is through a story.
Yeah,
You need stories with an Indian context.
correct.
So I didn't have those ready-made stories. Obviously, I had stories from American authors or from all over the world, but no Indian coaches, corporate coaches were writing their own stories. So I started writing real life stories. Then I
Right.
started writing fictional stories
Mm.
to help me with my coaching.
Okay.
And so from there, we went to writing a little bit and then writing a lot. And then here we are today.
Wow. I mean, this is, I think, the first time I've heard someone make an entry into the writing world in this fashion.
Yes.
You know, by
I'm
writing
sure.
case studies and examples for
Yeah,
training programs.
yeah.
Superb. Yeah, this is amazing. And then what? The bug bit you and then it just completely consumed you over a period of time, is it? The love for it.
Yes. Because I started writing and then I got better and better at it because I was reading a lot of people. You know, you read books which are written by foreign authors. You don't really, put yourself in their shoes.
Absolutely.
You know, it's just there somewhere out there, and you consume, and you don't think of relating their talent to your own.
Yeah.
But when you read bloggers, when you read people whom you know or you know of, and then you read them, then you begin to understand, oh my God, this is the way he has written it, or this is the way she has written it. So if I were to write the same thing, how would I approach it?
Yeah.
I don't know if it happens with other people or not. It certainly happened to me. So because I read a lot of Indian authors, I learned a lot from them. And so I got better at writing. And with greater ease with words, my vocabulary was thanks to my mom. She was a professor of English. So thanks to my mom, my vocabulary was always good. And readers always have a good vocabulary. So I gained expertise in writing. So then people started suggesting, why don't you, help us with our work? And sometimes I did. And then once I remember a friend of mine, he said, you really need to start editing. And I was like, me?
Me editing?
Because I never thought of myself as an editor. I did not think I was capable of it. I did not think I had either the talent or the patience to be an editor, or even the competence. Because in my own work, there used to be a lot of typos. So I remember she was very annoyed. In fact, I wrote about this on Facebook, on LinkedIn also. And she said, everybody has typos. Just because you have a typo doesn't mean you can't be an editor. In your own work, you will have typos. In other people's work, you will not leave typos behind because you're not the one writing it.
Correct.
So I made that connection. I said, chalo, let's start and let's see how it goes.
Very nice. And when was this? Which year?
This was in 2011.
10 years ago, exactly.
10 years ago, yeah.
And
so
what
it
were
took
the
me
first...
a year to... Yeah.
Yes, no. Go on. It took you a year to...
It took me a year to finally, screw up my courage and put myself out there. And for 1 year, I kept on dithering. And for 1 year, I kept on, shall I do it? Shall I don't do it? Shall I do it? Shall I don't do it?
What are the first few kinds of things that you edited? What kind of material and how was that experience?
Yeah. So the first few kind of things I edited, because I was a corporate trainer, so I got a lot of corporate documents because I was in touch with HR and, in companies where I had done training. So getting corporate documents and reports and those things were the natural choice for me. And that's where I started. But the first novel that I got, I still remember because I wasn't very confident as an editor at that point. So it was a 60,000 word manuscript. 60. And this person approached me and he was like, so how much will you charge? So I was like, how much do I charge? If I talk about corporate documents, wo to, I hardly got paid because I didn't know enough to know what kind of rates I should be charging.
Hmm.
So whatever the corporates gave me, I thought, chalo, at least I'm getting experience and all that. So this chap, I remember, I thought, I think 12,000 will be enough.
Okay.
Okay.
Hmm.
So, but I didn't, thankfully, I don't know who was watching out for me, but thankfully I didn't name the figure. So I said, you know what the rates are, the editing rates. He said, my budget is not that much. So I said, so how much is your budget? He said, my budget is 30,000. And
Arey
I was
wah.
thinking of quoting him 12,000. I was like, ये तो मेरी lottery लग गई.
And you thanked your guardian angel.
Oh, I totally, even today, I thank my guardian angel that I didn't shoot my mouth. Otherwise, he would have thought, अरे मेरी lottery लग गई.
Absolutely, man. Totally. Hmm.
So from there to now, it's been quite a journey.
So 30K for that 60,000 word novel.
Yes,
and which,
yes.
Was it possibly also because you were tentative in that whole field? You really did not value yourself so much as an editor those days.
Yeah. It's only after I edited his entire book and I saw for myself the transformation that had taken place, because his language was not very up to date. And so after that, I realized that I can really do this work. That was a huge confidence booster for me.
I can really enhance a book.
Yes, I can.
And then what? So one thing led to another, and did you start taking on more novels?
Yeah. Then I started taking more and more work. And Jyotirmay wants to ask something apparently.
Yeah. So we'll have time for that a little later. Yes. So
No, not to ask. It was a clap.
Oh, acha. Love. That way, all of us will keep clapping for Dagny all through, yeah.
Thank you.
Great. So, cut to today, and
Yes.
you are an editor, and of course, you've consolidated yourself in that realm pretty much, right? And you worked with so many authors and so many different kinds of books. But predominantly, do you still edit fiction? Predominantly.
Yes, predominantly.
And do you also take on other kinds? If yes, what?
I take non-fiction, but I take only non-fiction which is in the self-help and the self-development space, because I've worked in that area myself, so that comes natural to me. I don't do poems. I don't do
poems.
poetry. Yeah, and I don't take on fiction which has horror.
Okay.
Because then I can't sleep at night.
And you live close to a forest in any case, so there are, spectre.
A forest which is populated with jackals and hyenas.
As long as there are no jinns, it's okay.
No, there are no jinns.
So other than editing, you are also a writing coach, and you also coach people in writing books, right? So you're a book coach and a writing coach.
Yes.
Right?
I am.
Okay. So what is a typical week? What does that look like for you? And what kind of work do you, most of the time, what does it look like? What kind of work do you have?
Okay. Mostly I have editing work. Right now I have 2 coaching clients. So I give them assignments and they have to submit it every week. Then we discuss it on Zoom, and then they take on the next week's assignment. So one is a book coaching client. So she's writing a book and she submits her work for the week every week, with which I go through and then I give her suggestions. Though thankfully I have not had to give her any suggestions. She is a very good writer.
I see.
Yeah.
So this is that you're coaching her to write a book, is it? You're taking.
I'm basically keeping her accountable. I don't need to coach her. She is a very good writer herself. She just needs somebody breathing down her neck, telling her, "Kiya ki nahi? Abhi tak kyun nahi kiya?"
Thoda shake the rod a little.
Yes. So.
And what are the other roles that you inevitably take on in a book coaching exercise like this, project like this? Possibly as a sounding board.
Yes, definitely as a sounding board. I also See, a lot of people don't know how to structure a story. So any lacking on their part, how dialogue should be placed, what things should you be focusing on, all that show not tell business, and making the story more alive and interesting, and where the narration is slowing down, where it needs to be speeded up, what are the tricks to use to speed up a narration, all that. If it is required, then I do coaching with them as well.
Okay, okay. So you give them your suggestions, your ideas for that.
I have write-ups which I send across to them, and they read it up, and then there is a assignment I have to give them based on what I've sent them. Then they have to implement my teaching and then send back the submission to me.
So, in your experience, Dagny, what are the one or two most critical, what do I say, roadblocks, problems when it comes to a writer writing a book, someone writing a book?
Okay. The most common roadblocks I've seen is people second guessing themselves and doubting themselves. They don't think they have it in them. And they keep on confusing themselves. They start out with a great story idea, and then 2 pages down the line, it's all over the place. Because they've not outlined, or they've not written the synopsis, so they're not really sure where they're going with the story. So when you start writing, you just go all over the place. New ideas come into your head, and then you start putting them down, and then you are very reluctant to kill your darlings.
Yeah.
You don't want to do that. You don't want to delete anything you've written, because you're like, oh my God, itna mehnat karke likha, abhi isko kyun delete karna?
Right.
But in the process, you find that the story has gone all over the place. So that is one of the major roadblocks. The other roadblock is people don't really have a very clear idea of who their characters are.
Achha. Okay.
Character development is always extremely weak.
Okay.
You don't know. I mean, it may be there in your mind, but you're not showing the reader anything. I have read books in which I've read the entire book, but I don't know what the character looks like.
Right, right.
कोई physical description नहीं है. I don't know the color of the eyes. I don't know the length of hair. I don't know their body type. I don't know anything about them. Not only physically, but even mentally. I cannot say for sure इस situation में ये character ऐसा करेगा.
Correct. The mental makeup, the personality of the person.
That's not there.
Yeah.
It's simply not there. So the character can be doing anything and nothing at all. And I'll be like, अच्छा ठीक है. Which is not how you build compelling stories.
Yeah. So without the distinctiveness of the characters, the stories are not compelling, right?
No, it's not. The character is see, what happened is important, but who it happened to and how he handled it is the most important thing.
Correct, correct.
So if you don't focus, or you don't build up the character of your protagonist, how will the story be cohesive?
Absolutely. Correct. Then one book is similar to the other, one character is similar to the other, So
Absolutely.
Nothing really stands out.
Yes, yes.
How does one prevent this? So as a writer, suppose I'm a writer, setting out on this journey to write a book.
Yeah.
What are some of the things to be kept in mind to, take care of or prevent these two roadblocks? So you mentioned character building, and then you mentioned, outlining.
Yes.
So that the story doesn't go all over the place.
Yeah. So first of all is outlining. Before even that, you need to know what kind of story you want to tell. And you have to be able to encapsulate it. Usually what I do is, when I get a manuscript, I tell my clients to write what is called a log line.
Okay.
And a log line is just a 1-sentence summary of your story.
Right.
So you have to be able to write a log line which covers or touches upon all the major, instruments of the story. I should know the name of the protagonist. I should know the name of the antagonist. I should know what the conflict is about. And I should know where the story is going. Not the resolution. I don't need to know the resolution in the logline, but I definitely need to know what are the challenges the character will be facing. So that log line is it helps.
That's your first step.
That's the first step. So you write the log line and then you expand it into a synopsis, and then you convert that synopsis into an outline.
Into an
Okay,
outline.
as everybody, all of us editors here know that there are people who plan a novel and people who don't plan.
Who don't?
You
Yeah,
know.
yeah.
So there are pansters also and there are outliners also. So for if you want to be a panster, then you have to be of a very strong mind, not to let the flow of the moment of writing derail you from where you want to go.
Yeah, yeah.
So that end goal has to be very clear in your mind. And as far as character building is concerned, if it helps you, maybe pick up somebody from your surroundings and build up on that.
Someone from your life, someone from your surroundings.
Yes, yes. So you should be able to see that character clearly. And the most important thing is, if you put your character in a situation, whether it is a good situation or a bad one, you should know for sure what kind of reaction your character is going to give. If you're not sure and shall I make him kill that girl or shall I make him forgive her? Both possibilities cannot coexist in the same person.
Yeah.
So you have to know whether your character is the kind of guy who will definitely want to take revenge on somebody for small slights. So if you are not able to do that, then the thing is not clear in your own mind.
Correct. Then it's very wishy-washy.
Yeah, yeah. And it comes through in your writing, as you know.
Definitely.
Yeah. And then people say, I made such an effort to write the book, but it didn't do well.
So the thing is about anchoring the story and anchoring the people there in a very relatable, in a very firm manner, so that the readers are able to latch on, right?
Yes, yes.
Right. And the vividity then comes through.
Then the vividity comes through. Because then you know that, this character cannot do these things.
Yeah.
Or this character will do this only.
As far as editing goes, what are the tools of your trade, the essential tools of your trade? Having spent 30 years in the business now and evolving with times, in today's times, what do you think are your essential tools of trade?
My brain, my eyes, and my laptop.
Acha?
In that order. Nothing else.
Your brain, your eyes, your laptop.
Yes.
So what does each one of these contribute? I'm curious about the brain. Forget the other two.
Say, apart from systems training, I also did systems development. I was a developer for almost 2 years. So I trained myself to look at the big picture. Because when you are writing software for a company, you need to know how each of the components interacts with each other and what the whole thing is going to look like. So that helps me a lot when I'm editing. And so my first step always, whenever I get a manuscript to work on, is to read through.
Right. I do that too. Yes. Yes.
Yeah. So once I've read through, then I can, I don't know how it happens. Honestly, I couldn't teach it to somebody. I couldn't tell somebody what happens in my head. But I know that there are 8 to 4, 5, 6 components of the story. And this component is not working properly. So this needs to, be shaved off a little or maybe expanded a little or whatever.
Yeah.
So I'm not very, I cannot give you a clear indication what my
You can't give me a formula for that, and I completely agree.
I can't.
Because neither can I. I think that first pass, however, gives me the, what do I say, end-to-end sense, the holistic sense.
Yes.
And I think I get a better handle on the narrative.
True.
It's only after that you feel confident to even make a comment or two.
I read a manuscript 3 times before I permit myself the first comment. That is
I do it twice.
Yeah. So that is why my first stage of the editing process takes a little bit of time.
So you do 3 passes, just read, right? Read
Yes,
proofs,
yes, yes.
and then start putting
Yeah,
in your
yeah,
suggestions and comments.
yes, yes.
Right, right. And so as a developmental editor or a structural editor in that stage, what's key for us editors to keep in mind? You know, what do you think writers look forward to the most in terms of criticism and comments from us?
Okay. From whatever feedback I've received from clients, what I understand is people really appreciate it if you tell them, that brutally honest feedback. This is just not working, and if you can give a suggestion on how to make it work. No story needs to be perfect in the first round. That's the whole reason we exist.
Yeah.
So instead of I unfortunately I have come across stories where people were told, this needs to be dumped in the garbage bag, which is not a very nice thing. Somebody
that's shattering for a reader.
Absolutely, that's
totally
very shattering for an author, because they've just spent 3 years of their life pounding out 70,000 words. You can't tell them to throw it in the bin. So you have to tell them what works. Then you have to tell them what doesn't work and how to make it work.
Right. While you say this, and you spoke of blunt honesty, but I also think that we editors need some sort of bedside manner. You know, what you'd call a bedside manner with the doctors.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So absolutely right. So how do you couch your words, and what are some disclaimers? What is that? There's some need for pep talk along with the criticism that we give authors. So how does the whole thing work for you? What do you do?
Okay. So what I do is I never criticize first. I always tell people what is working. I really like that. This part, this was really good. This was really well written. But, if you could just modify the other part a little bit, maybe write it like this. Could we write it like this? Maybe. Does that read better to you? Like that. It's a collaborative effort.
Right.
I don't tell them, this is working. Okay. But this is not working. In fact, this is the worst piece of writing I've ever seen in my life. So you just scrap it and rewrite from scratch. You don't do that. You should not do that.
Right, right.
Make suggestions.
Right.
Tell them, is it possible we can change it this way? Just give it a little bit of a slant like this. Can we do that? So the reader also, or the author also feels that, here my editor is trying to help me out. She's not there to criticize me. She's there to help me out. You have to get into the trenches with the person who's fallen into the trenches,
And you have to make them feel that the book is yours also, right? It's not just theirs.
I always refer to the book as our book.
Our book.
Always. The moment they sign the contract, it becomes our book. And I tell them very clearly, say, whatever needs to be done, needs to be done. Please don't take my feedback as criticism. I want our book to do really well.
Yep.
And for that, if certain changes are required to be made, are you okay making those changes? Is it okay if I give you some suggestions? So I already have established that thing.
The rapport and your intent.
Yeah. So they know that feedback is going to be coming, and there will be certain parts which are not very nice.
Yeah.
And so they have already told me that they are willing to make changes. So we are good there.
Excellent. So the author is open-minded enough to take your suggestions and work on them, or at least consider them seriously.
Yes,
yes. But at the same time, they know that you're not there to rip the document into shreds.
No. In fact, in my initial interaction with them, I tell them, I'm going to give you suggestions, but please remember, this is your book. Yeah. This is your voice. So if you feel some suggestion from me is not something that you want to go ahead with, please feel free to reject it. If you want to talk to me about it, I will discuss it with you. But if you are dead set on not doing it, then there is no compulsion. If I've made a suggestion, you have to follow it. Nothing like that.
Right.
It's your book, ultimately.
Right. Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think it's very important to make that point clear to them.
Yes.
I think for two reasons. One is because I think there is the author's responsibility also, Dagny.
Yes, it is.
They have to step up and take ownership.
Yes.
And while most of them do, I also find that when it comes to making corrections and improvements, they're a little iffy about the whole thing. They're not sure about. And at the same time, if you happen to be an experienced editor, they really are not sure where you stand vis-a-vis them.
True.
They're not really confident enough to assert themselves sometimes. So
Yes.
I think it's excellent to lay that responsibility right at their doorstep and say, hey, after all, it's your book, so feel comfortable doing whatever you
Feel
think
comfortable
works.
rejecting my suggestions.
Right. How does it work when it comes to copy editing and line editing? What are some of the critical nuances there? And again, expectation setting between you and authors?
See, I'll be very honest with you. For me, line editing and copy editing kind of just meld
They
together.
telescope.
Yeah.
They're the same practically.
They just meld together because when I am actually editing the text of a book, it's very difficult for me not to correct the commas and the punctuations as I go along.
Yeah.
Because it seems to me, I'm already here in this paragraph, I'm
Right.
already rewriting half the paragraph. So if in the next paragraph, some punctuation needs to be corrected, I might as well correct it right now, then come back and then do it later.
Right.
So there are no watertight compartments. I do focus primarily on language improvement in my line editing, making sure that word brevity is maintained and the prose is tightened as much as it can be tightened, and perhaps more layers of meaning are added to it where required.
Right.
But I don't stop myself from copy editing. In fact, I don't stop myself from copy editing even in the first round. Because there are times when, I'm engrossed in reading, and then suddenly I find the punctuation's missing, or there are a few typos. So I think it's okay if I correct a typo or two.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. But you don't get too heavily into copy editing at that stage.
No.
Okay.
No. Only what is just,
absolutely obvious, leaps to the eye.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
So if I were to look back, if you were to look back in your career and, for the last 20 years, 15 years, 20 years, what have been some of the significant points of growth for you, Dagny, as an editor? How have they come about? Has it been happenstance, or do you think you did some things right at certain points of time to make that happen?
Yes, I did some things right at certain points, but not deliberately. It was happenstance. In retrospect, now I can say, what I did then, that was a good thing I did. But I had no clue I was doing a good thing.
So you didn't do it by design, but you ended up still doing it.
Yes.
So what were they? Can you just give us a flavor of that? What is some of them?
One thing that I did right was to join this blogging platform called Sulekha.
Achha.
In 2007, I joined, and I came across amazing writers. I mean, there was one particular writer. Later on, after he left the platform, I found out that it was not a he, it was a she. And she, I learned to write from her.
Okay.
I copied her, like I soaked her up. Because in one sentence, she would add 10 flavors of meaning in one short sentence. And I used to be like, and she was a dyslexic, mind you. She was a dyslexic, and her prowess with language was amazing. And I used to be like, I would never have thought of using these words in the same sentence. And yet they go so well together. They've just opened up the world. So that is one thing that I did very good.
All right.
Yeah.
Later, subsequently.
subsequently, okay, uh, after dithering about whether I should go into editing or not, I came across a lady's post on Facebook where she said, "I'm compiling a list of editors. So if you want your name to be included, please write to me."
Right.
And I was still extremely underconfident,
Hmm.
and a part of me was telling me, "What the hell do you think you're
Not to
doing?"
send it.
Yes, and yet I thought, what have I got to lose? She's asking for names of people. Let me give my name. Let me see what happens.
Hmm.
And while the other part of me was saying, she'll just throw your name out because you've not done any fiction editing. So where do you get off trying to project yourself as one?
Right. Right.
But I sent her the name nevertheless, with all kinds of gremlins gnawing at me, and I sent her, and she included my name, and that's where I got my first fiction editing work
project
from her list.
Lovely, lovely. No, I strongly believe in lists, yeah, especially well curated lists from
Yes.
credible sources, from
Yes,
reputed
yes,
sources.
yes.
I think so. Lists have worked for me too.
Yeah.
I think it's definitely absolutely important for us to put our names out there and kill those gremlins, like you said, and really just put ourselves out there.
Yeah.
Partly through social media, partly on lists, and collaborations. I think they work wonders, yeah. And
Yes.
more and more, I think the importance of those are coming through for me now.
And there is another thing I did which worked for me very well. There's a fellow blogger who had gone into editing. She had worked with publishers, and she had dropped out of social media completely. And again, not by design, but after 2 years of not being in touch with her, one day I thought, what happened to that girl?
Right.
I had no idea why she had dropped out of social media. I had no idea she's into publishing. I hadn't started editing myself by that time. But I just thought about her and I said, somehow I really liked that girl. Let me see if the number that she gave me, if she's still on that number. So I messaged her and I said, "Hi, is that you?" And she was like, "Oh my God, Dagni, you got in touch with me after 3 years." And I was like, "Yeah, where have you been? You're not nowhere around, So, and you stopped blogging also. So what happened?" So she said, "Oh, I got into editing and I'm working with a publisher." So then we kept in touch.
Achha.
Then a year later, she said, "I'm setting up my own editing consulting. So I would like you to join."
I would love to.
I would like you to join, she said,
Join,
because
okay.
I don't do copy editing very well. And I seem to, miss out on some errors. So I want somebody to go through it once. So will you help me? So I was like, such an honor. My God, I don't know anything about editing. Will you teach me? She said, "Yeah, of course I will teach you, because, the more you learn, the more it will be work off my back."
Yeah.
So that was, we worked together for a year, and that was a wonderful collaboration. And then later she relocated to UK because she wanted to take a writing course and become a full-time novelist. And somehow,
but you learned a lot from that collaboration.
I learned a lot from her. I learned to take a manuscript apart from her. How to break it down, how to analyze it, I learned from her.
And that must have given you the confidence to say, yes, I can get much better now.
Yes.
And I'm ready for the next stage.
Yes. So these two things have really, really helped me in my career.
Do you do, at least my sense of your work is that you focus more on developmental editing, structural editing.
Yes.
Right? Much of the editing work comprises this. Am I right?
Yes.
Okay. So for how long have you been doing this? And for other editors, for generally all of us in the fraternity, is it possible? Is it feasible? Is it feasible to thrive by focusing on, one kind of editing like this? Either copy editing and line editing, or just structural editing.
I would not say you can thrive on copy editing, because copy editing is the lowest rung of the ladder, and
it's on the lower scale.
It pays really badly. It doesn't pay well. So you cannot survive, let alone thrive. You cannot focus only on copy editing. You have to at least have line editing plus copy editing.
Hmm.
Then you can thrive.
But how about just the structural editing alone, or most of it being?
Structural editing is the highest paying part of the
Right.
editing process, and so yeah, you can completely thrive only on structural editing, because not everybody is able to take the story apart and reconstruct it.
Right. So that's seen as a higher order skill.
Yes, it is a higher order skill.
And therefore, people are willing to pay more for that too. I've seen. Yes. So in this, do you have a niche, or do you have a particular kind of people you work with? And if yes, how do you get your business from? How do you approach them? How do they approach you? How does that work?
I don't approach people. People approach me through the various lists in which my name has been included, as I'm sure they approach all the editors in the list.
Right.
But some I don't get, some I get. And so I started editing fiction from 2012. And from then to today, I've never been idle. I've always had 2 or 3 projects in my bag. Always. So I don't seek people out. I'm just there.
They seek you out.
Yeah, they seek me out, and I'm just there on social media. The little that I am. And my authors talk about me, recommend me to others. Now I've started getting referral clients. So that's very comfortable.
Right. So we discussed, the kinds of pay for different kinds of editing, and that hierarchy. India is a poor paying market, right? And we all know that not just editing, but generally any kind of service, right?
True.
So how do you manage that? Does most of your clientele, do they come from India? Do they come from abroad? Which are those markets that you focus on? And what do you think is wise to do in a sense?
Say, since India is a poor paying market, if you have the option to exclusively cater to overseas clients, that would be the best thing to do. Like Varun does, he works only with overseas clients.
Okay.
He doesn't work with Indian clients.
Okay.
But not all of us have those connections or that clientele as yet. Right. As far as my clientele is concerned, I get clients from across the board. I get overseas clients also, and I get Indian clients also. Both. Okay. In equal measure. I also get a lot of work from Indians who are living abroad. So they've already tested out the editing market in the overseas, and they find them prohibitively expensive. So
that's right.
So when I quote them my fee, they're like, "Arey, this is not much. ये तो किया जा सकता है."
But with this audience or with this segment, you're able to quote a figure which is considerably higher than what you would quote to an Indian living in India?
No. I quote the same fee no matter where you come from.
Okay. So it's take it or leave it kind of thing. That's standard for you.
Yeah, I don't negotiate with my fee.
No, what I meant is, do you have different kind of fee brackets for different kinds of markets?
No, I don't. No, I have fee brackets for different kinds of work. I don't have fee brackets for different kinds of people.
Right.
Like if I do ghostwriting, which I do very, very, very rarely, but if I do ghostwriting, then I charge a bomb.
Right. So when you look forward, we are in 2021 now. You've been editor for 10 years, and you've come from a systems training background. You spoke of MS-DOS, for God's sake, right?
CP/M was my first
CP/M. No, I don't even know what that is. What is CP/M? What is it?
CP/M was
the full form. What's that?
I don't even remember now. My God.
Okay, from a time when there is this concept called CP/M. Till now and moving forward, you're still pretty active as an editor.
Yeah.
What do you think is happening in the technology space for us, and how does that impinge on editorial work?
Okay, you already have AI assisted writing. which is definitely going to be error free as far as copy editing is concerned. So you will not get much work there. But people are still people. People still want to express themselves. They don't want, AI assisted writing is when, you're a content developer and you want to put in so many thousand words per day. It's for them. But for
Right.
people who want to write stories, that market will always be open.
And there is scope for human intervention, human work.
Yes,
there.
yes. Going forward, I think tools like Perfectit and Pro Writing Aid and Hemingway app and Grammarly, they may up their game a lot. And the copy editing part, which is actually the dullest part of the whole process, that might be taken care of in a very dependable manner by them, by such tools.
Right.
But developmental edit, I don't see.
That's a far reach. Huh?
That's quite far.
Yeah. So we can see our lifetimes through. By the time we handle a
absolutely. And if we focus on or we diversify into coaching people, I think we are quite sorted.
So you're giving us hope.
What are we without hope?
I know, yeah, absolutely. So you said copy editing is the dullest part, and that completely is how I find it too. I
hate copy editing. I hate it. I mean, I hate it with a passion I cannot even describe.
Oh, that is loathing. Wonderful, superb. So I don't loathe it, but you know what? So for me, the dynamics are that it's very intense. It's a very, very intense process, right? By nature. And therefore, one can't do for more than I can't do it for more than 3 or 4 hours a day. And I need to space it out. I need breaks. Boss, I need palette cleansers. My goodness. So that's where I am. But you know what? Developmental editing, on the other hand, structural editing is where I find myself, at my happiest.
Yes, me too. I just love
there's something there because it's at the story level. It's at the, I don't know, big piece level. I don't know why.
I've convinced myself that I am doing a public service by ensuring that a logically cohesive story will come out of my efforts.
Yeah. So good to see some a kindred spirit in you in that.
Yes.
So we spoke of AI and stuff like that. Now, when you think of this environment, therefore, quite a few segments, the content mill segment and people who look for lowest cost writing, you're not for them, right? You're very clearly not.
No, not at all.
You're for people who want to write evocative stories and bring out their message in a very impactful way, right? And what, therefore, is the soul of Dagny, the editor? As an editor, what is it about you that makes your clients come back to you and spread the word?
Okay. One major thing that makes client come back to me is my very, very strict adherence to the schedule I have committed to.
I see.
In my entire career, I have not ever overrun a project. I've always delivered before time. Up to 4 weeks and up to 5 weeks before time.
4 weeks before time?
Yeah.
Ah, brilliant. Yeah, that's super.
That's because I asked for too much time.
That you asked for extra time.
Yeah. So that is a ploy.
That's smart. Yeah. So you build in a lot of buffer before.
Yeah. So when you deliver ahead of time, the client is so delighted because they're not expecting it. And they're like, oh my God, this is so good.
Right.
Second, I in my mind also, I treat the manuscript as my own story. I've seen so many editors scared to make changes, or when you're doing line editing, if a paragraph does not read right to you, scrap it and rewrite it. I do that. I don't charge extra for it, but I do it because my commitment is to make the story better. And since everything is being done on a track changes mode, my thought process is that let me do the best that I can, thinking this is my story.
Yeah, yeah.
If the client wants to accept my changes, well and good. If they don't want to accept my changes, well and good.
That's okay too.
That's okay too.
Yeah.
So I go all out and do everything that I can to make the story more compact and cohesive and more interesting to read. Whatever is required, I do it. And I don't charge extra for it. So that is one thing that people really appreciate. I remember one of the stories I had edited where this boy was writing about his father. So he had, it was his father's birthday coming up, and he, wanted to write a novel, and he had already written two and published two novels. So this was the third one, and it was based basically on the challenges that his father had gone through. So I said, you've written the entire story, but at the end of it, why have you written the story? What is it that you want to say to your father?
Right.
Say your reader doesn't know that you've written your own father's story unless you tell them.
Correct.
So through this book, you want to publish it for his birthday. Through this book, what is it? What are those words of appreciation that you wish to give to your father? So he wrote something, I didn't like it. Then he rewrote it. I didn't like it. I said, look, what I'm going to do is I'm going to write it. If you like it, you incorporate it in the book.
Okay.
And I wrote it, and he was like, oh my God, this is exactly what I wanted to tell my father. How did you know this? I said, because this was logical. It was so obvious. That's what you want to tell your father. You want to say thank you to him for all that he has gone through and all the struggles that he has gone through, and yet given you a good life. That's what he wanted, right? That was the whole point. Otherwise, why would a son want to write a story for his father's birthday?
Correct. This is a very beautiful aspect of our relationship with our clients, and something that I give a lot of importance to, which is to understand the backstory for a book, the intent for writing a book. And many of them do come with some sort of a deeper purpose or some sort of connect. But at the first couple of conversations, unless we ask them very specifically, by themselves they don't feel the importance of this. So they don't open up. They don't tell us. So I've realized that it's only when you ask sharp, probing questions and listen very patiently about these, then a very interesting thing happens. Their writing, Dagny, also gathers more power, more beauty.
It does, because now they're sure, now they're clear why they want to write what they want to write.
Yes, and it's why like they have our validation for that.
So nowadays, what I do is, whenever I sign a contract with them, with a client, I tell them within a day or two, I would like to have a talk with you on phone. And that is when I ask them, why did you write the story? Why was it important for you? How long have you had the story idea? How long have you nurtured it? Because that tells me how committed you are to it.
Right.
There are people who come and told me, oh, I had this story idea when I was 7 years old. So that story has lived in you for 20 years. Obviously, you are attached to it. So when I approach the story, I must remember that this is 20 years of somebody's dream that I'm treading on. So I better be careful.
True. Treated with that kind of respect?
It does deserve to be treated with that.
Yes.
So I think maybe that also rubs off on my clients, and they see me treating their work with the respect they expect a narrator to give. Not just go slashing right, left, and center.
Absolutely. Correct. So you mentioned timelines. You mentioned the fact that you own the work. Take it up as your own book, and then we spoke about the intent, the understanding the backstory, and respecting them for that. And therefore, so these were three things. Is there anything else?
No.
You're talking about your way of working. What makes your work distinctive?
No, these are the three things that I would say makes my work distinctive. Another thing that a lot of editors probably don't do, because I have received feedback from clients saying that they are surprised when they write to me, they receive a response within 12 to 24 hours. And without fail, I'm always told, thank you for your quick response. And sometimes when it has been 24 hours, I think to myself, no, it's not quick. I took 24 hours to get back to you. In my mind, it's not quick.
Right. Right.
But if you reply within 24 hours to emails that you get from clients, they really appreciate it.
Yeah, they appreciate it.
And a lot of editors are not doing it. They should do it.
Hmm.
I know of three
At any point of
projects. I know of three projects distinctively who have signed up with me precisely because I responded so quickly to their emails.
Right. Right.
Because they told me that, you know,
Yeah.
we wrote to other people also, but yours was the quickest response. And,
Right.
you know, even before we signed up, you were ready to teach us a few things about our own story idea without expecting that we will sign up with you. You were
Correct.
ready to spend the time. You went back and forth with us for 20 emails, but you spent that time with us. So we didn't want to go with anybody else.
And you are willing to go to a little bit of depth, you know, in
Yes.
discussing the whole project. I think that helps a lot.
Yeah.
Very nice. What are some of your hacks? Stuff you do to keep yourself motivated, refreshed, and also in the same breath, how many books do you usually work on at the same time?
I usually work on 3 books at the same time. Don't take on more than.
And safe to assume that all of them are in the structural editing kind of books, most of them at least?
Yeah.
Okay, so 3 books at a time.
3 books at a time.
So how
because,
do you
compartmentalize? How I compartmentalize it is I only work on 1 book at a time when I'm actually working. I sign up 3 projects. 3 projects are concurrently running, but I don't work on 3 books because if I'm, for example, in the structural editing of 1 book, then I keep the other 2 aside. Once I just last night I finished with 1 and I've sent it across to the client. Tomorrow is my discussion with her, and then she will rework it. Meanwhile, I'll pick up the other one. Just mein mujhe line editing karni. I'll do that. She will work on her project. I will work on my project. So it works out like that.
How do you keep yourself motivated and
how do I keep myself motivated? Okay.
Do you need to keep yourself motivated at all? There comes your lovely farm. Superb.
What else do I need?
Totally, yeah. Fresh air, a dose of greenery, that's all you need.
The place where I sit down to work, there is a window right opposite. And that window overlooks my papaya trees. And I see them swaying in the wind and I'm like, oh my God, how did I get so lucky?
All of us are so green-eyed now.
Yes, it is. It's beautiful.
So, tell me about this. That reminds me of another question. So, how did you make this move from Jabalpur to, forested parts? And, for audience, Dagny lives about half a kilometer from the Dhuandhar waterfalls, which is, and she lives in the heart of Madhya Pradesh. She used to be in Jabalpur, which itself is a small city. So, tell us, Dagny, how, why, when?
Okay. I've always been very, very attracted to nature. And the place where I was living earlier was a fair-sized plot. I had about 15 or 20 trees planted in the 15 years that I lived in that plot, but that was not nearly enough. So I felt I needed more space to plant more trees and with polluted environments and with contamination in the food, I also began to think it would help everybody a lot if, at least my family, if we grew our own food. And I knew the antecedents of where my food was coming from and what has gone into it and what has not gone into it.
Correct.
So this dream, as you said in the introduction, that I'm living right now, it took 9 years to come through. In 2012, I began to hanker for a larger space. And at that point, I had just got my old house renovated. So I had spent a packet of money, or rather my father had spent it. And moving from there was really not an option. My
Mm.
mother had passed away just a year before that. And there were a lot of memories associated with that place.
Of course.
So moving was really not an option. But somehow I felt I need to move out of the city. And as a child, I used to be visiting Dhuandhar Falls, like since this is the only scenic spot, and my mom and dad used to love this place. So every time I would come here, I used to think, यार यहाँ पर रहने को मिल जाए ना तो जीवन सफल हो जाए literally.
जीवन सफल हो जाएगा.
हाँ. So I think the universe heard me and said, "Chal, tathastu."
You shouted loud enough, ma'am.
I think so.
Above the roar of the waterfall. And the
Yes,
universe heard you.
yes. I can hear the waterfall in my bedroom window. You know that?
So it really is half a kilometer away, right?
Yes, yes.
Kya baat hai, lovely life. And tell us more about your farm. What do you grow there, and how have you integrated that into your food? Because that was your idea.
Yeah. I only eat vegetables from my farm.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, during the entire lockdown, we hardly had to buy vegetables, maybe potatoes. But as of the past 6 months, I have about 3 quintals of onion lying in my house.
3 quintals?
Yes.
Shit, man. Are you an editor or a wholesaler of vegetables? What are you?
I don't know. I wear many hats.
I think this is your plan B. I think you're migrating into something else now.
I think so too, yes.
Into the vegetable trade.
Not vegetable trader exactly. I also grew 1 quintal of moong.
Oh.
That was my summer crop.
Okay.
And right after that, I planted urad,
Arey wow.
which I just harvested 3 days ago. It's actually out there, lying in the sun, drying up. And I grow my own wheat and my own vegetables. And now my fruit trees have also started producing. So hopefully my own fruits as well.
Lovely. Self-contained, blissful life.
Yes, that's what I'm aiming at.
Mm.
Now I only need a couple of cows and a few chickens, and then I'll be set for life.
You're a chicken farmer, you'll be a dairy farmer and a vegetable seller. Lovely.
Yes.
Meet the Dagny version
Mixed
number
farm,
3.0.
mixed farm, you know.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
So it really feels very nice to live like this, right? Self-sufficient and in control of what you grow and eat.
It's the biggest achievement of my life, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, all through lockdown, almost for 2 years, we hardly had to buy vegetables. Hardly. And whatever we needed, we either traded with the village, or else sometimes we had to go and buy. So we went and bought.
So I think you're going to have a stampede very soon, because a lot of us here, like I said, are completely envious and all that. But, and I think we're going to be planning our visits there.
Absolutely. I have.
You should only hope that you all don't come together.
I have spare rooms. Most welcome. Come over.
You have space to put us up.
Yes, I have space to put you up.
Not in the waterfall, I hope. You won't throw us there, no?
You never know.
घर में जगह है कि नहीं? घर में at home.
घर में बहुत जगह है, दिल में बहुत जगह है.
अरे वाह, super, brilliant, yeah. So excellent. I'm so happy that you've made this shift and you've stabilized there and you've made that your own way of life. I think it's really
but
such
you
a
know
big thing.
Yeah, there are 2 things which are a huge challenge even today. One is workforce. I mean, there have been times when there were no servants at all, zero servants. And with a large farmhouse, inside the house is still okay, but outside is a huge challenge. And the other thing is the wild animals. Oh my God, the variety of wild animals. Whoa. Monitor lizards, this big, 2 feet, 2.5 feet.
Super, yeah, lovely.
Yeah. And jackals and hyenas, as I said, and also leopards.
Very
and
nice.
Scorpions.
And
I
scorpions.
actually had a scorpion bite me a few days ago.
Okay. So before I throw the floor open for the audience for questions, I have one last couple of things to understand. What have been your most vulnerable moments? I think we don't speak enough about vulnerability, about rejection, about setbacks. So I want to spend a few minutes with you on that. What have been your most isolated moments, your most dejected moments as an editor, or in this entire journey of yours?
My most vulnerable moments come every year when there is a slump in the work. I don't know how it is with other editors, but from January to April, there is no work whatsoever. But now, since there has been a few years behind me, I'm okay with it now, because I know this is a phase. Work will come and work will go, and there will be 3 months in the year when I will not get any work for love of money. No way I will get work. So those 3 months, then I make sure that I save up enough so that I don't fret about it. So that is very scary. It was scary for me for the first 2-3 years.
Right.
Because my editing work is what brings bread into the house. I'm a divorcee with 3 kids. So, and although my kids are all grown up now, and they do pitch in and contribute to the household expenses, but ultimately it's my income.
Yeah.
So that it does scare me to think that of late I've been a little worried about whether my eyes are going to support me for the next 10 years, because it's so much of close work and screen time. It does take a toll on your eyes.
Definitely, yeah.
So that is one more reason why I decided to diversify into coaching people, so that I have less of screen time.
Yeah.
So I'm concerned about that. That also makes me feel vulnerable.
So this thing about dryness of business, when your pipeline dries up and there's no work, do you notice that is at a certain time of the year every year?
Yeah, every year.
You said Jan to April.
Jan to April, I don't get work.
But why is that? Have you tried to understand that and tried
no
ways
clue
to
whatsoever? The only thing I can think of is, Jan to April is a financial year ending, and everybody is scrambling around, and everybody is like, they don't have time to write, and they have even less time to spend on editing.
Sure.
They don't have money also to spend on editing at that point, because for whatever reason. So from May onwards, things start to open up a little bit, and by July, I'm drowning in work. It happens every and I'm like, why can't you space it out a little, God? Don't do this to me. Because I hate saying no to work, and then I've currently taken on too much work. Thankfully, one of my clients has gone to sleep, so I've not woken her up. Suits me fine.
Do you find this happening with you off and on, that you take on too much work?
Yes.
And my operative phrase is too much. Too much.
Yeah.
So why does this happen? How does one try to? Why can't you say no? And how does one learn to say no? How does one learn to draw boundaries? Healthy boundaries.
No, it's not a question of a healthy boundary. If I tell a client I don't want to take on your work, or I'm too busy right now, but I don't want to take work, it's not like they're going to arm twist me into taking work. It's just that I don't feel like refusing, because I've just gone through a slack period. So 4 months of no work, and I'm thinking, am I getting too big? And because then I asked myself, am I getting too big for my boots? 4 months of dry weather, and now you have too much rain and you want to turn your nose at it? Where do you get out doing that? Don't do that. So then I take on the work, and then I give it out to other people. I do that also.
Okay. But for the clients, do you remain the front person? Do they give it?
I remain the front person. I remain the person who
in charge of quality and everything.
Yes. Because whoever I send the work to, I have to go through it also first.
Right.
Yeah. And whenever I have shared work with other people, I've told the client that I'm going to be taking somebody as help Are you okay with it?
Yeah. You take their consent and then do this. I've lost your voice, Dagny. Hello. And she's dropped out too. But she'll come back. Hi, Dagny. Hello. I think she's there, but not there. Hello.
Hello.
Hi. You're back.
Sorry.
No problem.
Hmm.
I'm audible, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, excellent.
Evidently.
Okay, so last question actually. How do editors raise their profile and make authors understand that editing is important? It is in fact as much a backbone as writing is. So how does one make that happen, and how do you think we can do that as a community in India? There, she went silent. Was that a bad question? Sorry.
No, I'm so sorry, I got logged out again.
No, I know. But we can't see you. I guess it doesn't matter as long as we can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Go on.
Okay.
If you heard my question, just answer.
I didn't get the question.
No, I'm saying, how do we editors as a community, book editors, raise our profile, raise our sense of importance, perceived importance, so that authors understand, editing is as much a backbone as writing is, and therefore respect editing more, pay editing more, etc., etc. I'll have to tell her a third time now. Hello? Dagny, are you there?
I think her network is bad.
Whose network?
Dagny's network.
Yeah, I know. But I can see her come and go.
Yeah. We cannot see her face. I'm her friend.
Oh, cha. Hi.
Hey.
I'm just not able to hear her at all.
Should I call her?
Will you please do that then and see if she's trying to log in?
I think she has a poor connection.
We'll just give her a minute. But if you could try to call her, that'd be nice. Or I could. Hi. What's up? You're back. Okay. Thanks. Super.
Her number is busy.
No, but she's back.
Okay.
Yeah. Am I audible, Dagny?
Yes.
Yes. Did you hear my last question?
No, I didn't.
No, I'm saying, how do editors as a community, especially editors from India, raise the perceived importance of editing, book editing, the perceived importance of their work, so that clients pay more respect, pay more money. Generally, editors have a better deal. What do you think one can do for that?
First of all, I personally believe that you have to be like really good at your job. I've seen so many editors whose language skills are pretty shaky. They can't analyze a story to save their life. So get good at your job. That's about the only thing you can do.
Okay.
I can't think of anything else. I would love to hear from other editors. What about you, Kanis? What do you think?
Lovely. So we can segue into questions here. Lovely.
Yes. Why not?
You can unmute yourself.
Also learn.
Yes.
Okay. Good evening, everyone, and it's great to hear you, Dagny, and hello, Ganesh, and everyone else here. I actually have to tell you, I'm at the sunset of my work, and I am distributing work. And I recently had an awful experience of a very big assignment which I couldn't handle. So I would tell everyone that what Dagny says is 100% true, is to get very good at their work. And we still speak English even though we edit well.
Edit, supposed to
And,
edit English.
Yeah, though I have lived in Bhopal for many, many years, like 36 years, I have been able to desist from picking up languages and language foibles from what I hear. But at the same time, maybe I talk so much that I don't hear anything.
Come on.
but I really think that improving the skill is the best way.
Mhm.
Definitely, if you write a blog or something and you call your friends to read your blog, then people will understand that you do know something about writing.
Writing. Yeah.
That blog thing helps a lot.
Yeah. Yeah.
Before you can write, you have to read and read and read.
And read a book.
How about you, Cora? What do you think? Come on.
Well, I guess the only way is to be able to show what you're what. So sometimes, when you are kind of working with a client, you need to show them where they are, what you can do. That's it. But beyond that, I don't know. Unless they can value what you're worth, nobody's going to pay you.
That's
Right.
true. That's true.
Absolutely correct.
What do you think, Nirja? Mute ho aap.
If you unmute yourself, speak up, please.
Oh, I'm sorry. I said I have a lot of things to think and say.
Please do.
So if I start, I'll not finish.
अरे मैं भी बोल के थक गई हूँ अभी थोड़ा आप बोलो थोड़ी
He
देर।
needs some rest.
Yes,
one
Nisha,
thing,
you know both sides of the story because you're a publisher as well as
Yeah.
Yeah, very tiny, minuscule.
you know the story. So share.
So yeah, I think see my thoughts absolutely are the same as Dagny's. On most of the things that she said, I do the same thing. I like she said, I can't say no to a project. Then I don't like to. Also, going the extra mile for your clients, I think that helps a lot. They really respect you, and they really,
Yeah.
they come back to you for that. Then, being available to them and not, of course, and then once they know that you have their best interest at heart, they're ready to even listen to whatever,
Yeah.
bad comments you have. For example, I had an author, and I told her very clearly कि भाई आपकी English अच्छी नहीं है, इसको सुधारो. So it was like coaching come, where I taught her, I sent her links to start the read up. I told her this is how it is done, so that those kind of things help. Now, another bad incident like Kaneez was mentioning, I think we all have our bad incidents where
Yes, we do.
Yeah.
we meet all sorts of people and people don't understand us. Like Dagny said was about, when somebody comes to me with a book, it becomes our book. Now, the first book that I published was a friend's who's no longer a friend. And I'm very sad to say this because I did her first book I published was traditional publishing. And that's where I learned my lesson. I invested in the project knowing nothing about, publishing fiction as per se, knowing nothing about the market, nothing. I just took a chance. And the book was also take a chance on me. It was a romance fiction. That was the only part. I did 8 rounds of editing, 2 rounds of proofreading, 2 sample prints. I
My
did all
goodness.
that, ran around to, people to get it distributed, marketed. It sort of caught on Amazon. She's doing very well. But she broke off with me when I told her, जब आप ये mine करते हो ना, how is my book doing now? Every day, if you keep calling me up, and the only reason she would, even though she was my friend, I'm, not judging her. I'm sorry, I'm being so negative about it, but it's like a big rock on my heart, and on the And 3 books in the same manner. And every year I did the same process. And when I said our book, it's ours. I have invested in, I have not only invested my, time and effort of editing, I've also invested money into it because it's a traditionally published book.
Yeah.
And she didn't like it. She was so offended.
My God.
She wrote a letter to me saying, "It's my intellectual property right. Don't you dare say it's your book."
Oh my God. Oh my God. Oh my God.
My goodness, man. Where did she go with it?
She's now published. I think every 3 months she publishes a new romance fiction, and it's a business for most of these romance writers. I think Dagny and I have had a long discussion
Huge
over
discussion about it.
I can imagine how you must have felt when you heard that. Yeah.
I still haven't gotten over it. The shock of being treated that way. She doesn't talk to me, and calling me her best friend to now being, So it's hurt. It hurts you because I had never had a proper job, in the sense I had worked proper job. I was earning peanuts at my publishing company. I was chief editor of an academic publishing, a local academic publishing house, who I would say more like a guide type of books,
Right.
syllabus oriented books. I didn't know anything about editing. I didn't know anything about the base. I did everything on my own, told them, taught whoever. They were not interested, but yes, 10 years, I at least knew the basics and how to, So yes, so then Dagny said, that she makes it sure that she tells her client that it becomes our book. That was what touched me, because that's how I feel.
Yes.
Because I immerse myself, and I go through, though if they'd ask me for developmental editing, I never say कि मैं ये नहीं करूँगी, वो नहीं करूँगी. I just do everything for them.
Right.
From punctuation to grammar to restructuring, even rewriting, I've written in chapters. Sometimes, of course, if they are free to reject it or accept it, but I'm doing it for them. So I think, yes, I may have suffered. I do go through a lot of stress because of that. And I think Dagny and Kaniz may know how it feels. I think all of us know how it feels.
Yes, we all know.
I want to tell you that my experience was that I made this mistake of signing a contract. So then, after giving me very little, 100-page and 110-page little booklet kind of things, I would call it a booklet. Suddenly, I got 150,000 words. And the author spoke to me on the phone. She said, okay. And the publisher said, I don't think it'll be a problem. Well, I actually had to go. I had to fly to Delhi because I almost had a nervous breakdown. Now, that is my weakness. Okay. What was wrong with it? Number one, it had a very weird set of punctuation marks. Sometimes single, sometimes double, sometimes 2 single, trying to masquerade as double.
Wow.
Second problem, it was very poorly written. All right, no problem. Correcting English is my baby. Then it had the challenge of having to translate one-liners or two-liners, because the people in the book were being interviewed and they were in their own language. So I landed up translating Gujarati and Bengali and Urdu.
Oh my God.
Yeah, Hindi and normal Hindi.
So you were editor come translator.
These languages, I don't know anything actually besides a little spoken Japanese, a little spoken and writing, reading of French, and English I know. Okay, my Hindi is also not up to the mark.
हमारी लिखने वाली हिंदी नहीं इतनी अच्छी होती है.
Yeah,
yes.
But I had to translate from transliteration, and the transliteration was rubbish. For example, if you want to say yes in our languages, we say ha. H-A-N, but it was written ha all the way through. So
that takes on a completely different meaning.
Okay.
Yeah. So she put 2 poems of very well-known Urdu writers. Okay. Now, who is like it's maybe a little worse than my Hindi even. Okay. And I do not read anything. So I'm really fit. I have friends and they helped me and I got through it. And I actually asked the author that why don't you choose your favorite translation? Because those 2 poems were not in any translation. Anyway, I got them done. Then now it comes to the point where she gives me a feedback on each section. So that there are 155 on a pages like 70, 80 pages, there are 155 comments that I have to go through. Now,
Oh my God.
new experience for me because I'm very snooty. I actually know a little bit of English. Now the comments say, is that all right? So somewhere I have won. But something that was supposed to go from the 6th of July to August is still in the making.
Oh man.
I admit I am slow. However, the work I do.
Ganesh, we are all slow. I remember Dagny's post on LinkedIn where she said, today I have a goal of doing 20 pages a day. And I congratulated her. And
you just do about 10 or 15 pages and you've lost about 5 hours, yeah?
And you begin to hate the book by the time you're done, you know?
Oh,
Yes.
no.
I was working 6 hours a day and I have retired 3 times. So this is my next time of coming out of retirement for fun. I'll do nothing more than PhD theses and little books. I have done children's books. I have done the whole gamut of things. But I really felt that almost at the point of a nervous breakdown, a family friend came in an aeroplane and took me back by the return flight. And today morning I have come home and you can see that I had a good time and I got that book done and it's only the 150 remarks.
Yay!
Congratulations.
But I'm very blessed that I always get work by word of mouth.
Yeah.
And I think that's a beautiful way to be, Kanis. I think I love that. And someone has said, Sarah has also said that referrals are great. I think it means a lot because A, in terms of time and money, you're not spending much on marketing yourself. A. B,
Zero.
Yeah, correct. But B, I think it's also a measure of respect.
Yeah.
It is, I mean, what more do you want? Yeah, but you just sit back, do your work very well. And Dagny, you're absolutely right. Just doing our work very well is the best way we can speak up for ourselves.
Yeah.
And, that results in more and more work. I mean, aur kya chahiye, yaar? Sahi mein.
Absolutely.
Yeah, marketing of the work that you produce.
Sorry?
How much the quality of work that you give
speaks for that, yes.
is your
It is your calling card.
Yeah.
Bilkul,
Yeah.
bilkul. And all this talk
It
that we're
helps to
having
be
about...
first language English.
Ji? Sorry?
Sorry.
No. I just want to
Please carry
say,
on,
we've been
Ganesh.
speaking about the importance of editing and the kind of labor, how we slave over books. There is this thought that I came across somewhere that great books are not written. Indeed, they are rewritten.
Yeah.
Every great book has not been written, but rewritten.
Rewritten.
Ganesh, the authors will kill you if they hear you say that.
No. But they know that we are in their corner. Yeah. We are firmly in their corner.
हम लोग क्या कर रहे थे? Book आपने लिखा था, हम लोग क्या कर रहे थे?
See, Cora, it's not like that.
Yeah.
Where rewriting is concerned, nobody is stopping the authors from rewriting their book. And they do it also.
Yeah.
It's not the first draft that gets printed. Right?
Yeah.
It's the second or third
that's the
draft.
point.
Even if they don't go for editing, it is a second or third draft. So that means they have done the rewriting also.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So it's not.
I know what you're saying. I mean, we all of us know as editors.
Yeah.
Correct.
How much of red and blue there is in the book. Once we've been through the book, all of us know it. But to openly say it's been written,
Totally.
an author will kill us.
Yeah.
I think what Ganesh meant was rewriting from the author.
So let me I'll clarify. I mean, y'all, I think instinctively get it, but just in case we didn't, it's just the dynamics of writing, the dynamics of creation. I think that's what it goes back to. As authors, so I write, many of us here write. So what you write is very close to your heart. It's too close to your eye. So you really have scales. Somewhere later you develop scales. So we're not able to understand or have an objective view of what works, what doesn't work all the time, things that are repetitive, things that are close to our heart, but don't add value to the draft. So various things like that, right down to bad punctuation. So I think it's just a matter of taking a step back, self-editing it, but also bringing in a fresh perspective, another set of eyes. And if they can just give us feedback, and that is meant always to improve the manuscript, we incorporate that manuscript, those suggestions. I think that rewriting is what I mean. That's what I'm talking about. So it's perfectly in the spirit of things.
I've seen it when you do it as an editor. There are two things. If you are doing a story yourself, because I write too, when you write and when you edit, you realize the difference, because it's so difficult to edit your own work.
Yes.
As it is to
You never see your own errors, and when somebody points it out, you're like, oh my god, how could I miss this?
Exactly. When somebody else points it out, oh my god. But when you're looking at it from a point of view of an editor, you're looking at it from a completely different perspective. And that's when you're able to tell a writer what's wrong. But when you're looking at your own work, it's so much more difficult to do it.
You can't do that so much.
You can't do it. It's like
I think that happens, when I do, I offer to
kill your own darlings. You can't, every word.
You don't want to kill your own darlings. You never do.
You fall in love with every word you've written.
No one wants to do it.
Yeah.
I feel I go through that when I'm doing my second round of editing also for my clients. I would have missed out things which I then catch in my second round.
Yes.
So the different perspective when you step away from it, that is also important when I do that for my clients.
True. Yeah, the second edit always makes you find a lot more that you missed in the first edit. That's why you always do at least 2 or 3 edits before you actually give it to the client the first time.
Yeah. Okay, Chitra has a question, a couple of questions actually. So Dagny, you please take this. So in structural editing, do you also make major plot changes?
No, I don't. I suggest changes which the client may or may not accept. I tell the client, see, this is the reason this is not working out, because there is a big plot hole here. How your character had transitioned from this to this, that step is not clear. Either you put in the foundation there, or else you make some changes. And I suggest the changes. So I don't make changes myself. I never make changes.
But you suggest the changes.
Yeah, I suggest. I do suggest.
Any major plot related change, right?
Yes. If the plot is weak and it's just not working out, it's not fair to the book to let it go out as it is.
Absolutely.
When I can see that there is something wrong, I have to tell the client, this is not working.
Correct.
So there have been times when I have done that, yes.
I think this seminar goes a long way in helping me see the value of editing and the hard work that goes into it. So says Chitra. Yeah.
Thank you, Chitra. Thank you so much.
Very, very heartening.
May your tribe multiply.
Dagny, how long do you take on for your projects on a developmental edit? How much time do you ask for?
Cora, it depends on the word count, because I work by word count. But if it is like a 70,000 word book, then the first stage of developmental edit takes anywhere from 40 to 50 days. Yeah.
But you ask for more from your client.
Yeah, I ask for more.
Okay.
So you ask for what? A month and a half, 2?
Yeah, I ask
2 months?
even up to 2 months. Yeah.
2 months.
I do.
So then you
I never take 2 months, but I ask for 2 months.
You ask for
just
that.
to be on the safe side.
And after the revised manuscript comes back to you, then how long?
Then the next stage is line editing, for which again depends on the language, how bad it is, and how many changes I need to make.
Right, of course.
But again, it's almost the same amount of time.
Same amount of time. So.
Yeah. Only for the copy
editing.
editing.
You wait so long? For like 2 months? So 2 plus 2 makes it 4 months?
Yeah, 4 months. Most of my projects go up to 5 months. Yeah.
Oh, that's a long time.
Yeah. People do tell me, oh, you're taking too long. And I'm like, that's how I do it. I can't help it. I can't commit to a lesser time and then, have you breathing down my neck and then me getting all pressurized and missing out errors and don't
Something
work
going
like
wrong.
that. Yeah, I don't work like that.
Correct. Sarah has sent in a comment. Referrals are great. I think of every client as much more than just one client. Very true. I value each relationship. Absolutely. Do my best work. Relationship is absolutely the right word. Do my best work for them, and they introduce me to their friends and colleagues. Absolutely correct. Wait, where did that go? Yeah, that's great for me because I really don't like marketing. They are also usually my best clients because they are not complete strangers. Yeah. All right. Okay. So she's in a place where it is past 10 p.m. and she's gone for dinner. Boy.
Oh, okay.
Australia.
Okay. And then
Australia,
Vahida has said, I'm not able to go down, scroll down. This is a pain. Yeah. Vahida, could you just read out your comment? Yeah? Or could you just tell us if you're still there? She's still there, I guess. Yes. So could you just read out? There's something wrong with my cursor. Vahida? Okay, I've got it.
I'm here.
No,
I just.
I'll read it out for you. I'll read it out for you. Fresh perspective is the need. Fresh perspective is the need of a true author. That's where an editor is so important. Need more of your kind. Okay.
Thank you so much, Vaida.
Yeah, of course we need editors like you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
And yeah, Chitra. So Chitra, does that answer your question?
Yes.
Yes. All right. So are we ready to wind up? Or is there something else that someone wants to ask Dagny or say?
You don't want a tour of my farmhouse? How mean.
But that's a large farm. Okay, can you do that?
So what?
Come. Why not?
Okay. I literally had to arm twist you into.
It's not every day that we get to see a farm, yeah, at such close quarters.
Yeah, that's true.
Please, karo.
We've been invited, Ganesh, to a farm.
What? Sorry?
We've all been invited to a farm. We're waiting for the lockdown to get over.
I'm switching off the video and audio here and I'm logging in through my phone. Just 2 seconds, okay?
Yeah, sure.
I'm feeling much relieved that I wasn't slow, and I'm feeling much relieved at the idea that 70,000 words takes so much time. Of course, I don't work on fiction. I believe fiction is too difficult for me. And I've worked only on translations of fiction, which is a little different. I think I did a academic writing course from 1st of August to 31st of August. And this is iFest, it's in the South. And that's basically for PhD scholars. But since I'm an editor, I wanted to see the other side of the story. I learned so much.
Right.
And it's relevant for all kinds of editing.
Right.
I just have to understand that I don't need to be so serious because there is more to life than editing. But anything more to life?
Okay, so this is my order.
Wow.
Arey wah.
And this is me going down the stairs. And this is the farm. Can you see the trees?
Yeah, but why are you tilting your phone?
Yeah, I shouldn't. I'm not doing it anymore.
अरे नहीं अब तो tilted दिख रहा है. Now you're
Tilted at Dagny.
No, are you lying down on the floor and showing it to us?
No, of course not.
Now you're okay. Stay
Now
that
it's
way.
fine.
Very
This
nice.
is Nini. This is the field in which the wheat gets sown and the moong gets sown. This is where I harvested the urad from.
Acha.
And I have one neighbor, one old gentleman who lives all alone. And these plants that you see, this is corn.
Okay.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's rained, has it?
Yeah, it has been raining. That's why half of my grain got ruined
Arey baap re.
because it got soggy. And these are my bhindi plants.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. And let me take you around the house. Okay. There are tomatoes there.
Nice.
Tomatoes again.
Hmm.
And this tree that you see with the broad green leaves, that's an asafoetida tree.
Okay. Okay.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And this is my drumstick.
Moringa.
Yes, moringa. And this is the turmeric patch.
Hmm.
I've been growing my own turmeric for the past 6 years now. Even in my old house, I used to grow my own turmeric. And these plants are ginger.
Uh-huh.
And these are, have also started a nursery.
Hmm.
So this is papaya, still growing. And this papaya is all grown. More turmeric. Some more plants for the nursery.
Hmm.
Over there is this year's onion. That patch is radishes.
Mm-hmm.
This is eggplant. Another papaya, or laden. That patch is arvi. I don't know how you call it in English. I forgot. Colosseum.
Colocasia.
Oh, whatever that is. And
The leaves are so nice.
yeah, you eat the leaves also.
Yes,
They are
yes.
also, yeah. And this is another papaya tree.
Ooh.
Must hai yaar, Dagny, superb, superb. Such a rich kind of place.
Yeah, and this is bottle gourd. It's growing wild all over the place.
Hmm.
Yeah. This patch is
how we should-
spinach. This is fenugreek, and that patch is what is called lal bhaji here.
Yeah.
Red amaranth.
Yes, yes.
Acha.
Yeah. And these are radishes, and that is dhania patti,
Hmm.
and that is last legs of ladyfinger. And beyond that is the peanut patch. And this patch is empty right now because I harvested my sesame seeds. We planted sesame seed this year. So that patch is empty now because just finished harvesting it 2 weeks ago, this patch. So this was it. This tree
Oh.
over here, this one, this tree, the one, the big green leaves.
Okay.
This is bay leaves.
Acha.
Tej patta.
Yeah, tejpat.
Wow. ग्रीन सूखा ही देखा है हमने तो
हाँ बहुत तेजी से बढ़ता है तेजपत्ता. Grows very fast.
And does it, can you use it fresh like this?
Yes, you can.
Yes, yes, yes. There are a lot of uses
This is
for
my
bay.
little lawn at the
Wow.
back of the house.
Yes. Uh-huh.
Are you making envious now?
This is my compost bin,
Ah.
and this is my lotus plant. Still waiting for a big pot to arrive. And And this is palm leaves.
What leaves?
Pan.
Pan.
Pan ke patte.
Tuna लगा के.
So this is it. This was
Wow.
the found.
Beautiful.
Very nice. Thank you so much. बहुत मजा आ गया यार.
You can see the sunset.
वो विवेक को बोलो ट्रैवल सेशन भी हो गया एक ही में.
Wonderful. So shall we wrap up, Dagny?
Yes, of course.
Can you turn the phone towards your face again? And can you
I will.
sit down somewhere?
I always do the thank you.
Ah.
So thank you, Dagny. I'm so
You're
glad to
most
act with you
most
on
welcome.
my first afternoon home
Yeah.
after more than a month.
Acha, you're back in Bhopal.
Yeah, I'm back in Bhopal. Yay!
Lovely. Excellent.
Yay.
And I
Thank
can
you so much.
Jabalpur very easily. So beware.
That's right.
Thank you
Yes.
so much, everybody. It was lovely talking to you.
Same here. Dagny, thank you so much. It was
Thank you,
very
Ganesh.
rich. Yeah. And loved it. Totally loved it.
Thank you so much. Even I loved it.
All right. So sign
Okay.
off. All right then.
Yes, absolutely. Bye.
Take care. And bye to everyone else.
Bye, everyone.
Until next time. Tada.
Until next time.
Okay.
Bye bye.
Thanks, Ganesh. Thanks, Dagny. Thanks, everyone.